So hello everyone, welcome to this webinar on the 5 key KFS mistakes and how to fix them. The idea is to keep this webinar to the point. So here's the brief structure. So for the first 2-3 minutes, we'll briefly recap what's been happening with KFS implementations in the last 6 months since the RBI deadline. Then we'll dive into the core topic, the 5 key KFS mistakes we've seen happening, along with operational solutions on how to fix them, whether you use legality or not. Third, we'll show you legality's digital KFS solution, which is an easy way to build digital KFS flows and ensure all compliance is taken care of in the flow itself. And this will be about 5 to 6 minutes. And then we'll throw the floor open for an open Q&A, where we'll give everyone mic access and a chance to talk. But if any questions crop up during the webinar or demo, you can ask them right away in the Q&A box below. We often in these sessions take up questions mid-session if they are asked in the Q&A box and if they're specific to what we're speaking to at that moment in time. So whenever a question crops up in your head, do ask in the Q&A box. We do not end the session without answering each and every question. And yes, we will, again, I'll repeat, we'll be sending you a recording of this session so that you can share it with your colleagues. But we would still recommend that you stay for the open Q&A. And we've designed the session to be light on your schedules, right? So a brief introduction. I'm Aditya, Head of Growth and Marketing at Legality. Before Legality, I was a practicing lawyer in Bangalore, and I have previously also worked with several banks deeply on compliance and enforcement related issues. I'm joined by Shubhesh, our product marketing lead at Legality, and he'll be taking you through the digital KFS demo towards the end of the session. So just wanted to start with clear context, right? Why this KFS guideline is so important, not just from a compliance perspective, but from a wider industry standpoint. A recent post we saw on LinkedIn sharing on screen right now. And I'm sure if you search LinkedIn, Twitter, other social media, you'll find many similar ones, right? KFS was fundamentally introduced, or these guidelines were fundamentally introduced because many customers just have a distrust of financial companies. And sometimes it's not that the rates actually change or that the companies are being unfair. It's the perception that this actually happens, right? And this perception is often created because borrowers don't understand complex multi-page contracts. Often the real financial details are hidden in the weeds of multiple clauses and things like that. So KFS for many years has sought to plug this gap. And when the RBI saw that, look, KFS implementation is patchy, they introduced, and it's not there in all loan products, they introduced these master KFS guidelines, and they're very keen on enforcing these new KFS rules. So let's begin. KFS, as we just discussed, was a culmination of a long line of RBI regulations where RBI sought to enhance customer transparency and protect customers from fraud and mis-selling. The 2015 circular mandated a KFS type document for banks. MFI rules in July 2022 mandated KFS for MFIs in India. The digital lending guidelines in September 2022 mandated KFS for digital lenders. But as I mentioned, RBI realized that these various guidelines were A, either not being universally followed, and B, transparency issues were cropping up in lending as a whole, not just in these specific sectors where KFS was mandated, right? So the RBI decided, let's eliminate this confusion once and for all, and issued the master KFS directions last year in April 2024. So these KFS guidelines actually supersede and override the KFS provisions in the other 3 guidelines mentioned on this slide, and also made KFS mandatory for all retail and MSME term loans. So virtually what you have is a situation where across most of lending, KFS as of last year, as of October 1st, 2024, is now mandatory, right, for all retail and MSME term loans. So that's actually a confusion we used to receive and sometimes still do. Hey, I'm an MFI, or hey, I'm a digital lender, I already do KFS. That doesn't matter. You need to replace your old KFS format and old KFS compliance with the requirements and format specified in the April 2024 master directions. That is the only KFS guideline currently in force for the industry. So these 2024 guidelines essentially resulted in 7 key operational requirements and what is currently being displayed on screen, right? KFS to be in a strict format as per Annexure A with a computation sheet for APR and a repayment schedule. KFS to be in a language understood by borrowers. KFS should be provided to borrowers before executing the loan agreement. KFS should be also included at the beginning of loan agreement as a summary, and the lender must collect a clear borrower acknowledgement on this KFS. Lenders cannot now make any change to the financial conditions of the loan unless they take explicit consent on a fresh KFS with the borrower. And of course, the KFS should have a unique identifier. So these were the 7 key operational things, right? Old news for you. So when RBI released the guidelines, they gave a 6-month timeline to comply from April to October. And this is probably what they thought the process would be like, right? A very smooth, fuss-free process. But in reality, for many lenders, this is how it ended up, right? When lenders initially studied the guidelines, they realized that while they were quite simple on the face of it, there were some ambiguities, which still were quickly resolvable, but were ambiguities all the same. But more importantly, the guidelines spelled out some key operational changes that lenders needed to make. So often we saw lenders actually trying to rely on these ambiguities to find a reading that would enable them to comply with 0 operational changes, right? This process of constant evaluation and back and forth led for some lenders to some very rushed last-minute implementations of the new RBI KFS guidelines. And we think that it is this rush that has led to the 5 common mistakes that we're going to discuss today. So what are these 5 mistakes? One is collecting, and we'll go through these one by one. One is collecting only a vernacular declaration rather than translating the entire KFS into a local language. 2 is even in cases where KFS document is in a local language, the entire surrounding digital interface in digital journeys on which the KFS is being displayed is still in English. 3, the KFS continues to sometimes be shown after the loan docket, like a summary document, other than a preview that is now mandatory. 4, the KFS acknowledgement is often collected nominally by way of a simple extra checkbox in the process. And 5, KFS has often been implemented in physical form, even if the rest of the process is digital, which creates massive operational bottlenecks. The first 4 are compliance mistakes, and the final one we believe is an operational error with some compliance implications. Let's dive into each one by one, but before that, natural question in your heads is, how did we know these mistakes are happening, right? Like, how did we come up with these mistakes? We didn't just make up this list, right? We sourced this purely by experience. So far, we've helped 15 to 20 plus lenders stitch together end-to-end digital KFS flows. We're in the process of helping 25 to 30 more lenders move their KFS process to a 100% digital compliant process. And over the course of these conversations and a lot more conversations, we sourced these common gaps. These mistakes kept cropping up, right? So this is all knowledge from the market itself. So let's tackle mistake 1, right? Showing vernacular declaration rather than translating KFS into local language. And I'll be covering each along with the operational solution. But if you have any questions, please do ask in the Q&A box. We will take it up during the course of the session. So I think many of us are already familiar with this concept of vernacular declaration, right? It's showing on screen right now is a sample text of this declaration, which we just sourced online, right? So for years, lenders across the board have used this declaration in cases where the borrower does not understand English, right? It's across the board market practice. The idea is that this declaration affirms that while documents are in English, the contents have been read out and explained to the borrower in the vernacular language. So there's 2 issues with this. One, the very declaration stating that the document has been explained in vernacular is itself in English. 2, even if this declaration were to be in a vernacular, it would still not comply with the KFS guideline requirement. So let's go back to the RBI KFS guidelines and revisit this requirement once more. So what does it say? It's very clear. The KFS shall be written in a language understood by the borrower. So let me read that again. The KFS shall be written, right? Keyword written in a language understood by the borrower. So this is clear as day. There are 0 ambiguities here. The entire KFS, which is anyway a short document, must be in a language understood by the borrower. And for many lenders, as lending moves to underserved segments, as lending moves into smaller towns and rural areas, this means a non-English vernacular local language. There's no 2 ways about it, right? So if you're expanding your lending net, then your loan terms must be understood by the borrower in writing. This also means that simply collecting a declaration in vernacular that we showed on the previous slide and explaining the terms and conditions in vernacular is not sufficient. The writing itself, the words themselves must be in the vernacular language. So this is the compliance requirement. The main gap we saw was how does this exactly work operationally, right? How do you fix this? Vernacular declaration is a very simple way of fixing it, of attempting to fix it. So how do you actually fix it? So one, you need to map out the common language spoken or understood in the areas in which you are disbursing loans. So let's say if you're in Bengal, the languages would be different than if, say, you were in Maharashtra, right? If you're a digital lending app, then I'm afraid you need support for a much wider variety of languages because in theory, your distribution is pan-India, and I'm sure your aspiration is also a pan-India distribution, right? So in both cases, pan-India or even within a particular area where there are multiple diverse linguistic groups, the next question that arises is, look, all this is well and good in theory, but operationally, how do I ensure that the particular customer who's in front of me or on my app at that moment in time gets the KFS in a language they 100% understand? The solution in physical KFS is honestly a bit cumbersome. You need to just have those copies handy in all possible languages that are there in the area that you serve. But in digital KFS, you can actually solve this at an individualized micro level, right? So the first step is to configure and digitize a KFS template in each local language that you want. And in the backend, map that template to a specific document execution workflow, right? Then in the front end on your app or web interface, or maybe on your agent or field app, you offer the customer or borrower a language selection choice, just like you see in ATMs across the country, right? Each button is mapped to the workflow you have configured for that language in the backend. So when the customer selects that language in their front-end experience, the workflow mapped to that language is initiated, and the customer gets to experience the KFS execution in a language they understand. So through this, you deliver the KFS journey in a language the customer understands. One, and by customer taking an active selection of language, you effectively collect the customer's positive declaration that by selecting this, they do in fact understand the language, right? We do support this functionality and flow in legality via our APIs, and we'll show you in the demo component a brief demo of how this works in the backend. So that's the first mistake. The next mistake that happens in digital KFS flows, again, language related, and this is a very easy one and obvious one to make, is, okay, like you've translated the KFS and the KFS document you have in all possible languages, right? Great. But in a digital flow, what about the interface through which the customer is interacting and acknowledging the KFS? Let's look at the compliance requirement once more, right? Contents of the KFS have to be explained and the borrower must acknowledge the same. Now, there are two possible flows. Even if your KFS is being done digitally, there are two possible flows for you, right? One is an assisted model where your agent is there, customer comes to the branch. Agent is there to supplement the localized KFS you're showing them with their own explanation and understanding of what the process involves. And the second is a remote model. For all you digital lenders on this call, there's a good number of you on this call. This is the model you follow, right? Here, the customer is interacting with you via the phone. There is no agent usually involved here. There's no one to actually explain the terms and conditions, no one to explain to the customer what the exact process they are undergoing actually is, right? It's all app driven, and the aspiration is to move it to as seamless an app driven process as possible. So for remote flows, especially, it's not enough that the KFS itself is in a local language. You actually need the entire interface the customer is executing and interacting with the KFS on to also be in a language that they understand in order to fully comply with the spirit of these rules, right? Because let's look at this example, right? In a digital KFS flow, there's a lot of information the customer has to interact with that's outside of the KFS document itself, right? And say an e-sign based acknowledgement journey, right? There are multiple buttons, elements, and even a full consent the borrower must give in order to get to a stage to actually perform the acknowledgement of the KFS, right? And so when someone sees this in a language they don't understand, there are a lot of questions like, what does this all mean? There's just a bunch of text and buttons. And what happens when I click this button, which I don't understand, right? And the real implication of this for you is there's a lot of scope for the customer to say much later, I don't know what I was doing, right? Which is a problem for you later. There's also a scope for drop-offs at this stage of your digital KFS journey, right? Where a routine process becomes a source for drop-off because customer just doesn't understand, is overwhelmed by what is this interface actually telling me. So why leave this open, and like, why not plug this gap? And the solution is simply to ensure that not just your KFS, but the entire execution interface for the KFS is also displayed in a local language, right? And this local language should correspond to the language of the KFS that the customer selects, as we discussed previously, right? That way, the entire journey end to end is fully comprehensible or understandable by the customer, right? We do support this functionality, and we'll show you in the demo component of how it works. So that's the first two mistakes, language related. Ensure the KFS document is in a local language. Ensure the interface is in a local language. Map these two different workflows in the backend, and in the front end, allow customer to select language of choice is the surest way to comply. Some intensive upfront implementation effort, but operationally, it runs the smoothest this way, right? Let's look at the third mistake, right? And probably the most glaring one. Most lenders don't do this, but we have seen a few do this, right? Many lenders are still sending the KFS after the loan agreement has been signed, right? Like as a summary. And often the reason cited is we're not looking to this project on priority right now. So here KFS is sent a summary document after the rest of the loan document has been processed, loan docket has been processed, rather than as a clear before loan agreement step as the RBI intended, right? Let's again zoom into what does the RBI say, right? And it's quite clear. KFS must be shown as per the guidelines to the borrower before the loan agreement, right? So there's no two ways about this as well, right? The borrower must view the KFS, acknowledge the KFS before the loan agreement process is completed. So if you have not done this or implemented this yet, we would advise not pushing it, because the RBI may not have taken action on anyone today, but they are quite clear about the rationale and purpose behind KFS. And have actually passed these rules because previous ones have not been complied with by everyone. So if they see non-compliance, there might be heavy sanction given RBI statement so far. All right. So this before the loan agreement actually led to three possible flows, right? Some ambiguity was there during implementation. That ambiguity resolution often also leads to delays, right? So let's quickly recap the various flows on how you can actually implement this, right? So in loan products where there is a staggered signing, where sanction letter is sent first, signed, and then the loan document is signed separately, it's a very easy thing. Simply attach the KFS with the sanction letter, get it all signed as part of one docket, and after that, share the loan agreement for signing separately. So in cases where you have the staggered signing, it's super simple. But in most cases, especially in digital lending, the sanction letter and loan agreement are part of the same docket, right? What do you do then? Because the staggered signing is not possible. So there are broadly two approaches. Approach A is the watertight, cautious approach. This is where you send the KFS first, collect acknowledgement electronically, and then display the loan docket to the customer and collect a separate acknowledgement there, probably in the form of an e-sign. So here there are two different authentication processes that the customer has to do in the flow. Approach B is a slightly looser liberal approach, where the KFS is put in the same docket as your entire loan kit, rest of the documents, but KFS is on the top of the document. Here the customer ultimately just e-signs the whole docket just once. So there was a lot of confusion around this last year. And some people said we'll go for approach B. Many said compliance is our number one thing we're optimizing for, so we'll go for approach A. So this is a call you need to take. Obviously, we would recommend the more cautious approach, but ultimately it's a call that your compliance team would have to take. Now, of course, the main worry with approach A is extra drop-off risk. There's two different authentications happening. So we built a way that you can do these two authentications with a unified flow, reducing your drop-off risk. And again, we'll show this in the demo component. So mistake 3 is simple to fix. Implement KFS, send it before loan agreement in your flow. Whether you choose approach, the cautious approach or the liberal approach, what's not on the table and what's not optional, or what you really can't do is send the KFS after everything is done, right? The customer should not be seeing it for the first time after they've signed the loan agreement. So that's mistake 3. Now, last two mistakes before we move on to the demo component. Again, if you have any questions, do ask in the Q&A box. We sometimes take them up in the middle. Otherwise, we'll be opening up the floor for open Q&A in just after the demo. So mistake 4, right? Using an I agree clickwrap box for collecting acknowledgement. So let's look at the requirement again. What is this acknowledgement requirement, right? The rules say that acknowledgement from the borrower must be obtained that they understood the KFS. And if as a lender, you need to make any changes to the terms and conditions of the loan, you can only do so after collecting explicit consent from the borrower. So what's the exact issue with a simple I agree or an I accept box, right? Because a clickwrap is super easy operationally, but that's really not the point, right? Because with clickwrap, there is no way to actually attribute that click, that I accept click to the actual borrower. And this I accept does not actually show up or display on that KFS itself, right? Which means that the borrower can later deny that this KFS was shown to me or that I acknowledged it. And which also means that in an RBI audit or enforcement proceeding, court or RBI can't actually verify whether this mandatory acknowledgement step that is clearly laid out in the rules was actually, like, whether it actually happened or not, right? So really use clickwrap only if you have a very high risk appetite. And the real mistake here is not using clickwrap per se. It's using it, like many know and use it full well, knowing the potential compliance risks and consequences. The real mistake is using clickwrap without being aware of the enforcement and audit risks. Many have done the implementation purely because, okay, I have an existing clickwrap process. Let me just extend it to KFS, right? Know the risks and take a call with full knowledge of the risks of implementing it with clickwrap and I accept or I agree box, right? If you want auditability and verifiability, there are multiple options available to you, right? You will need to go for a mode of e-authentication, whether you build it yourself or not, that can be traced back. The key thing is can it be traced back to the borrower in some way, in any way, right? And can it later be audited and verified? Is it on the document, right? The KFS document. Most secure is, of course, something like an Aadhaar e-sign, but honestly, in most cases, we've seen lenders find that this is too many steps, too much friction if a borrower has to do two Aadhaar e-sign twice in a flow, right? But there are many other neutral interim options with much less friction than an Aadhaar e-sign, but with much more security than a clickwrap, right? One such option is implementing a two-click quick signature, right? This is where the borrower scribbles their sign or acknowledgement, like an initialization, on a signing pad or actively selects the name and things like that. And this mark then appears on the KFS document itself. All right, we'll show you how this works a few minutes in a demo. This is an approach that you can do, right? So that's the fourth mistake. I agree, clickwrap. If you're doing it, know the full risks of doing it. Otherwise, choose a method or build a method where you can actually trace that, look, this authentication was done, acknowledgement was done by the borrower, and this acknowledgement reflects on the document itself, right? Those two are the priorities. So now we're almost at the demo stage, just one more mistake to cover. And the final one is a operational mistake, but it can have compliance implications, right? And that is many lenders just went ahead with a physical KFS process in a rush to comply. So we've seen two things here. Companies looking to go digital, but because of the new KFS guidelines, the whole loan paperwork process remains physical because it's just easier to integrate into legacy physical processes. Two companies who are digital for the loan docket and have been digital for a few years, but choosing to get the KFS physically signed because, oh, I don't have the tech bandwidth to even think about this right now. But the flip question is, what's the cost of not having the bandwidth right now? Because while a digital KFS implementation takes some bandwidth, consider the cost of retaining a physical KFS process. So the TAT for signing of a physical KFS is high, whereas for a digital KFS, it takes a few minutes. Physical KFS means costs of paper, printing, storage. Digital KFS, none of these costs exist. In a physical KFS, even if it's one page, it's a physical object that your branch teams have to spend time managing, right? Like printing, checking, scanning, storing, getting it signed. In digital, they really don't have to do anything other than explaining it, taking the borrower through the terms, and just getting that sign in one shot through a digital mode, right? And finally, a physical KFS can, of course, be misplaced or lost, right? A customer can, as a result of this, come back later and say they didn't receive it. But in a digital KFS, the signed KFS will actually go to the customer's WhatsApp, SMS or email, and they can't say that they didn't get it. And they also feel a bit secure because they have it in hand. And this last point is very critical because I think it ties into the overall reason for the KFS rules, right? That is, the RBI wants this KFS in each loan because it wants to reduce information asymmetry and enhance transparency, right? And the RBI recently has been taking a lot of action against banks and NBFCs for impinging on these two values, right? Whether it's changing up loan conditions, changing up interest rates, hiding higher interest rates in a maze of language, not having local language, things like that, right? So the KFS rules are a critical tool that the RBI envisions to actually improve information asymmetry and transparency, right? So ultimately, the RBI is fundamentally, when they're reviewing, going to look at, are you sending the KFS to the customer in a way that is transparent and gives them full info, right? And in a physical KFS, even if you do diligently give it, you just cannot systemically achieve this, right? There's no way to actually trace that you gave it to the customer. Maybe there is some way if you set up an operationally complex process, but even then there's no guarantee, right? It's super hard for this traceability and guarantee and surety that it's gone to the customer. But in a digital KFS process, that's a full trail of the KFS end to end and unimpeachable proof that, look, it has actually gone to the customer. So beyond just the operational benefits, there are clear legal and compliance benefits on the transparency front when you switch to digital KFS. So that's the 5 mistakes. We come to the end of covering these 5 mistakes of the session. 5 mistakes lenders make when it comes to KFS. I just wanted to recap the points quickly before we go on to the demo. We'll be sending this deck, so you don't need to take screenshots of this screen. We'll be sending you the full deck. First mistake, collecting vernacular declaration instead of translating the entire KFS. Solution is simple. Ensure you do actually translate the KFS, right? And in a digital KFS journey, you can have all these translated copies prepared, map them to a particular workflow, and in the front end, have the customer select. Second mistake, not translating the interface in digital KFS journeys in which the KFS is being executed. Solution is to ensure the interface, apart from the KFS document, the interface is also in a local language. Third mistake, and the most obvious one, is, of course, not sending the KFS before the loan agreement. Do not treat this casually. Start building a process where mandatorily you are sending the KFS before the loan agreement is signed. Fourth mistake, using an I agree or clickwrap to collect KFS acknowledgement. Again, this is at your own risk. Understand and know the risks before continuing such a process. Let your compliance team take a call there. We would recommend, of course, and you may call us like with a bias on this, but just looking at the rules as well, we would recommend switching to an auditable form of acknowledgement. You can build it yourself as well. Otherwise, you can just ensure you know the risks before continuing. And the fifth mistake is, of course, retaining physical KFS processes, even though they are often operationally costly for you and actually reduce your transparency in this entire KFS process. So with that out of the way, let's quickly look at a 5 to 6 minute demo of Legality's digital KFS solution and how exactly it works, right? So Legality, some of you are new to Legality here. Most of you are not. For the people who are new, Legality is a document infrastructure platform that BFSI companies can use to digitally transform document execution in a fast, easy, and compliant way, right? We have a deep stack of features that can be stitched together to build compliant, flexible, and customer-friendly digital KFS journeys, which we'll show you in the demo. We're already live for KFS implementations for more than 15 banks and NBFCs in various verticals. And this number keeps growing. We're in constant conversation with many banks and NBFCs you don't see here as well. And we wanted to give you, the attendees of this webinar, some of you are from organizations here, maybe in different verticals. Some of you are in completely new organizations that we're not in touch with. We wanted to give you a clear idea of what exactly this digital KFS solution is, how it exactly works. And ultimately, we're going to show you the tech architecture on Legality, but ultimately you will also understand the logical flow of things in case you want to build it yourself as well. So let's do a quick demo. After this demo, which is about 5 to 6 minutes in length, we'll do an open Q&A where you can unmute and ask questions, right? So over to Shubhesh to do the demo. After that, we'll do the open Q&A. Meanwhile, if you have any questions from this, I think we have one question, which we'll take. So Shubhesh, while you set up your screen, the question is, can the APR, right, be shown in KFS as part of final docket for e-signing and not on the offer screen where loan amount and EMI is shown along with fees? So To be honest, looking at the RBI KFS guidelines, this is not, no, you cannot. You can show it as part of final document, but you also have to show it before, right? Because the RBI KFS rules are quite clear. If you look at 6, right? The KFS, which is to be shared before the loan agreement, 6 of the KFS rules. The KFS shall include a computation sheet of APR and amortization schedule. APR will include all charges which are levied by the RE, right? So it's clear that the KFS that the RBI envisions to be shared must necessarily include APR and must include the amortization schedule. And RBI wants, this is an operational change again that you need to make, and probably one we didn't cover, but RBI wants you to commit to that APR and amortization schedule beforehand itself, right? This is the clear expectation of the RBI as per the rules, all right? So just looking at the rules, no, you have to share the APR during time of when KFS is being shared with the borrower before loan agreement process itself. Happy to, towards the end, discuss what are the operational ways to do this, because I do understand that sometimes between offer time and loan agreement time, some terms do change. So let's go in a bit more in depth after the demo on this specific question.
Hey, hi everyone. Could you confirm if my screen is visible?
Yes.
Okay. So far in the last 20 to 30 minutes, we've heard a lot about features. We've heard about WhatsApp. We've heard about local language. We've heard about KFS template itself being in vernacular language. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how Legality Digital KFS brings all of those features together to make a very seamless KFS signing journey for your customers. So on your screen, if you can see, it's my WhatsApp chat, and I've already created a KFS invite for the sake of this demo. And it's quite easy, right? Like having sending your invites on WhatsApp. Everyone uses this app. Everyone is comfortable with it. And unlike an SMS or a email, like you don't have to keep scrolling to figure out where the link is, which is something a struggle for people like who are beyond a certain age. So I just click on e-sign.
Yeah, and also, of course, you can display this directly in your app. We're showing you the WhatsApp interface because that's, of course, an option, and we don't do an API integration for the demo. But you can avoid this link process itself and just have it directly display in your app or web interface as well. I think for most digital lenders on this call, a significant chunk of you, that would probably be the preferred flow. That being said, even in that flow, if the customer, say, drops off your app, which often happens, ultimately WhatsApp acts as a great backup way to ensure it's signed, right? Because ultimately, no matter how much we at Legality optimize our UX or how much you optimize your app UX, Indian customers just prefer WhatsApp as their UX of choice, no matter what, just the truth. So WhatsApp often, even in API flows, is a great backup to have if they drop off your app.
Yeah. As you can see on the screen, this is a local language feature. Here, the customer or rather the borrower can set whatever language they're comfortable in. So this workflow is a Hindi KFS workflow because I'm an English and a Hindi speaker. So I'll just click on Hindi because that's what I'm comfortable in, let's say. This is my KFS, which is in Hindi language. If you can see, I've also filled in a few details. Ignore the correctness of these details. These are just some dummy data I've put, but you can do this via legality templates if you want. And let's say if in the previous step somebody selected the wrong language, they can at any point of time change the language of the interface as per their liking. So I'll just click on Aage Badhe, and as soon as I do that, it's giving me the e-sign quick sign option wherein it's gonna put this name as an acknowledgement onto this KFS. So I need to click on this e-sign consent, and if you can see, even the e-sign consent is in Hindi. So the person who's acknowledging your KFS knows exactly what they're doing at any given point of time till the last step.
And we've not literally translated it, we've colloquially translated it, right? So it's not just a simple Google Translate that we've run. We've, in each language, used phraseology that people are familiar with colloquially so that they understand what's happening on screen. It's not just a literal translation of English. And we've done this for 12, 11 Indian languages so far, and we'll keep adding more if there's a demand for it.
Actually, that reminds me, I'll show one more feature. Let's say I want to switch my language. I'll go to Kannada. And in Kannada, the same word which was saying Aage Bhade here, and in English it says proceed, you'll see the length of this text has increased. So what we've done is for your customers to be able to smoothly use the local language feature within our interface, we're changing the way each element reacts with the language. So if just notice the size of this button, I'll change the language again, and if you'll see it's changed. So I'll switch back to Hindi. I'll click on Aage Badhe. I've given my e-sign consent, clicked on that, and I'll click on e-sign. So this document is e-signed, and I've got a WhatsApp notification of the e-signed KFS as well as the secure audit trail. I'll just show you this
So
KFS
this
step.
was a quick two-click acknowledgement, right? This is not a full e-sign if you notice. Most of you are familiar with the e-sign process. This was one option, which is a very light touch process, right? Because a lot of lenders told us, look, I want a step that acknowledges and shows on the KFS, but I don't want it to be an Aadhaar e-sign. I don't want it to be a very complex process. So what we just showed you is a very light touch, two-click process. In experience, it's similar to clickwrap, but adds a bit more solidity because it appears on the document. They select their name, they give the consent, the name is mark is appearing, they click next, and appears on the document. You can, of course, have things like a signing pad appear there where they initialize. You can do an Aadhaar e-sign if you want. There are multiple options that you can insert into this flow. What we showed you in the demo is the lightest touch process possible that does show up on the document and shows up in the audit trail. All right. But ultimately, that step, you can insert many different types of sign. You can insert an OTP based sign where they do an OTP and then do an acknowledgement. You can insert the signing pad where they do OTP and signing pad. Without OTP and signing pad, Aadhaar e-sign. There's just like 8 to 9 different options that you can actually insert into that step. We showed you the lightest possible touch because, especially with a lot of digital lenders, they wanted that lightest possible digital touch in digital KFS flows. But ultimately, you can add some good friction there if you wish for security and compliance reasons. Things like face match, GPS capture, and things like that.
Yeah. So I will also show you some of these features that Aditya just spoke about, other forms of e-sign methods, some security features that we discussed. But for now, if you'll see, I've received the PDF itself on WhatsApp, which is very convenient, right? Because then you don't need to click a link, go to some URL, and then access that document. It's always handy as a PDF within your mobile. And same is the case with audit trail. So I'm just going to show you the KFS first. So this is the KFS. If you see, my signature has been affixed here. I'll just zoom in a
Of course,
bit.
coordinates, we've not done it for the demo, but you can pre-configure coordinates, which Shubhash will again show you in the backend
Yeah, I'll
configuration.
show you how to do that also in like 2 minutes. So you'll see this is my signature, which has been affixed to all pages of the KFS automatically. And this is the secure audit trail. This is a testing account that I'm using, so ignore the watermark on the audit trail. But if you see in this audit trail, it tells you what this trail, people don't, your borrowers don't get confused when they receive this document. It maps every single action that they've taken. If you see, it also tells that from this IP, I opened the document on this OS browser and all. It also captures the consent that I've given.
From which device you've given the consent, things like that.
Yeah. So that's
And
audit trail.
where the final notification was sent. So the last notification ultimately is where it was sent, right? KFS has to be ultimately, borrower has to acknowledge it and they need to essentially keep a copy. Tells you where the notification has gone, so they cannot deny it later.
Yeah, so if you see activity says completed, it tells which email the document was sent to. It tells you also the number where it was sent, and it also tells what is the role of this person. Nobody can deny it, neither the signer nor the person who sent the document. So I'll go back to the signing screen. So this was the KFS journey. Now let's say we want to take the cautious approach, wherein first we are doing KFS, then we want to do loan agreement. But a very bad experience would be you keep sending multiple e-sign invites to your customer. They'll get confused and they'll not know what to sign first. And eventually that's not an experience you want to give them because they'll feel this process is more complex than it needs to be. So what we have done is here I will have to click on this TK button, which in English says OK for people who don't understand Hindi, and it will automatically redirect me to the loan agreement associated with this KFS. In an API integration, you can do it automatically, but because this is apparently a dashboard-led flow I'm showing you, and what I mean by dashboard-led flow, I'll tell you in 1 minute. Just bear with me. So I'll click on this thing, and if you see, I'm automatically rerouted to a new e-sign journey. This is for my loan agreement. Let's say I just want to continue this in English only. This is my digital stamp which has been affixed. We have defaced this. We've also put signature coordinates on it. The loan agreement, it's in Hindi. If you see the full agreement, we've put my signature will appear here. Again, I've not configured these coordinates for the demo, but I'll show you how you can do it if you want the signature in a very specific place on your agreement. So I click on proceed, and it's giving me 4 different ways to do Aadhaar resend. Because so we offer OTP based Aadhaar resend, where you just enter the Aadhaar number, you get an OTP on your mobile and it's done. You can also use biometric iris or even face authentication. Face authentication is our latest mode of Aadhaar e-sign, wherein the person just needs to take a selfie and using their UIDI face scans, the e-sign will get authenticated and fixed onto the loan agreement. So I'll just continue on.
So one question, just go back to the agreement. Yeah, so the one question we received and we'll address is now, is the document had both English and Hindi at different places, right? Like how it's in one language. So again, it's a demo document. So the demo document, there are some issues, like as in there are some misses, but ultimately in your document, you basically give us your template that your team has vetted, and that template will be on the document, right? Like we are not creating the agreement for you. We will technically architect the agreement as a template for you, but fundamentally you will give us the template, right? And we will engineer the template and put it up on whatever that template is, we'll make it available to you in the digital process, right? So this is a outcome of the demo. Similarly, language interface and demo, the language interface thing, right? The select screen, for example, you can do away with that select screen. So if you have a Hindi workflow configured, you can ensure that Hindi workflows by default displayed without selection with the Hindi template of KFS, all right? If you need a Tamil document, that would be a Tamil workflow you trigger. That would be a separate workflow that's triggered on the front end when they select that language, right? But on the dashboard journey, it's not easy to dynamically switch between workflows. That would have to be done at an API level. So the document would remain the same here, even if the interface changes. But in an API level, you basically configured default languages with default documents. And when it's in the front end clicked, that document along with the interface language is passed to the customer. Again, possible in an API journey to be very smooth. In a dashboard one, it's slightly clunky. So apologies for that, but that's how it would work. And so if there's English in this document, you can ultimately send us a template which only has that language, and that template will be visible to your customer. The second thing is WhatsApp messages are in English currently. Yes, WhatsApp currently would be in English. We are looking at ways to localize it, but we do customize SMS in different languages, right? So the SMS based links can be in local language. But yeah, WhatsApp currently ultimately is still in English, but we are constantly looking at ways to localize each and every touch point. So we are looking at ways we can localize WhatsApp as well. All right. I think we follow up on the APR question. I think this APR question we'll take at the end, right? Does APR need to be shown as part of offer details, or can it be shown separately as part of KFS in a subsequent screen? Got it. Yes, the answer is yes. It can be shown as part of KFS in a subsequent screen, right? So that KFS kit. The question is APR. Now, can it be with the KFS, or does it have to be with the offer if it's a staggered approach? You can show it with KFS in a subsequent screen, but I think there is still some ambiguity here. So let's take this up at the end. Okay. Go ahead, Shubhesh.
Yeah. So I'll come back to this Aadhaar sign screen. So let's say I want to do OTP based Aadhaar sign. I'll select that and click on next. I'll give my e-sign consent and I'll click on sign document. I'll be taken to the ESP screen where I'm landing onto Protean. Legality is connected to web and CDSL as well. And what we do is we periodically keep checking out of these three who's the highest, which is the ESP which is giving you the highest success rate. So whenever your borrower is trying to resend, they will be taking to that ESP instead of just whichever ESP we've put on the top. Because let's say Protean is facing a downtime and we've put this on and people are going to this, they will not be able to do Aadhaar e-sign. So we make sure that they go to an ESP where they're able to do Aadhaar e-sign. And let's say even then they're facing an issue, all they have to do is to do a quick. I'll come back to this screen. I'll proceed, and you'll see I'll be taken to a different ESP this time. So if let's say somebody was facing issues on Protean, oh, it didn't work this time. Must be some issue on the sandbox side. But in normal situations, if Protein was facing downtime or was facing issues, then the person would be taken to either CDSL or Verasis basis their success rates. So I'll give it authorization and I'll enter my Aadhaar number. So I'm just entering my Aadhaar number, and if you see on the screen, this looks a little different from your normal protein screen. It has purple, it has legality logo, it has this purple box, peach background. That's because we're also supporting brand customizations with the ESP screen itself. Because what happens is customer is doing one digital journey, right? And they're seeing your logo, your colors throughout, and they suddenly lands onto this screen and they would not see your logo, your colors. That's a bit confusing, and that automatically raises that suspicion: is this correct? So just to avoid that, we also give this flexibility to customize the Aadhaar e-sign screen on Protein itself. On CDSL also you can do it, but there we only have the option to upload the logo. We can't do the color bit that is in the screen. So I've entered the OTP that I received, so I'll verify it.
Yeah, let's move to the back end, I think now.
Yeah, so this will get e-signed. I'll go to the dashboard now. So this is the legality dashboard, and
So now we're going to show you how we showed you a customer facing journey. We're going to show you how you can actually easily customize and set up all these features depending on your different compliance requirements. You want a quick sign, you want an Aadhaar e-sign, how you can actually set it up very easily through the dashboard. And we mentioned also like you can set up different workflows for different languages. How do you actually set that up in the backend? It's a super easy process that you can like very simply deliver via API to your front end. Yeah, go ahead, Shubhesh.
yeah. So if you see, as if you said, you can configure a bunch of workflows. So here I've configured this KFS workflow. I'll show you what it is and how it works. So yeah, so I've opened this workflow. First step for any workflow or sending any document is to rather create the document. If you see, we have a bunch of options here. All the templates available. This is a Hindi KFS template that I've chosen for this workflow that you saw in the demo. But I've also put a English KFS template in my sandbox. And let's say if you don't want to use a template, you have a LOS LMS system which is creating these KFS in vernacular languages already. You can simply pass the PDF version of those KFS to legality and we'll get your signatures on those. Post that, actually wait. I just wanted to it's not relevant for KFS, but still wanted to show you like stamping functionality which is relevant for loan agreement. So it's quite easy. You just need to do toggle and select which stamp you want. So I'll move ahead. This is the loan agreement. Or sorry, KFS document. And if you'll see, these are a bunch of details that we need to enter into this agreement. And I'll just come back to those signed KFS that I did. If you'll see, all of these details are filled that you can see on the screen now. This you can either pass from your LOS LMS itself, or you can just fill the data in the dashboard while you're sending the document. For the sake of this demo, because this is a dashboard flow, we filled it in the dashboard itself, and that's what I meant by a dashboard flow, wherein you're sending the document from the dashboard itself. You don't need any API integrations if you're using our dashboard. So I'll click on next because I don't want to make any changes. And so yeah, this is the main screen wherein we are setting who signs this KFS. I can add their name, I can add their email, phone number. If I want to send it to them on WhatsApp, I just activate WhatsApp. This is the local language feature. So what I had done for the demo was, because I wanted to show all the languages once, I had allowed the signer to select language. But let's say the solution that we showed you, you have a bunch of workflows, you click one and the entire journey is in that language. For that, you can just set a default language in that workflow. Ideally, what I should have done in this workflow is I should have chosen Hindi and I would have gotten the entire interface from step one in Hindi itself. So I'll just do this and click on save, and I'll quickly send one document and show you how easy it is to make changes to the KFS flow without needing a tech team also. Just to remind you, I changed this from selecting language to a fixed language, and it will automatically reflect in the actual live flow. And let's say if you want to add any security feature to this, let's say you want to capture the face of the or the GPS coordinates of the person who's signing this KFS. We also allow you those. You can capture their location, you can capture their photo. If you have a KYC photo available and you want to match it with it, you can. If you want to test their liveness whether it's actually present or not, you can. So we give you a bunch of security options this way. Then let's say you don't want to do two-step quick sign. We offer you a bunch of other types of e-signs that you can choose from. A lot of these might be too intensive for a KFS, so that's why we think quick sign is the most suitable one for KFS use case. But let's say if you want to club your KFS with sanction letter or loan agreement and want something like, let's say, virtual sign or other, feel free to do that. Depends totally on how you want to go about it. I'll click on next. So my workflow has been updated, and the only update we did there was we changed from all the languages to Hindi. Now this is the screen where we see the final document and we can place the e-sign coordinates. And if you can see this box, this is where the signature will appear. But let's say I don't want it to be here. I will just go to this, I'll clear all the coordinates, and let's say I want all the signatures here. I'll select all pages, and that's it. My workflow is done.
Specific page, if you want to change it, you can just move it for that specific page. Yeah.
So I'll just run this very quickly to show you the changes that we made reflecting in the live one. I'm not filling any data, just to quickly show this. The feature that you see right now, it automatically filling is our contact book. So you can just save contacts in legality dashboard itself, so you don't have to manually fill it over and over again. So this is the final document. If you see the signature will display here, it tells me that I'll send the invite. The invite has been sent. I'll come back to WhatsApp. I'll click on e-sign again. And if you see this time, it then gives me the option of that languages, and automatically this button is in Hindi. If I click on this thing, it is selected Hindi itself, and I had to do zero integration, zero edits for it. Simply dashboard was enough. Yeah. Anything else that you want us to cover other than the demo?
No, I think that's good. Thanks, Shubhesh. You can represent the deck. Yeah. So now actually let's move on to the open Q&A. I think there's one question which we need to get to the bottom of on the APR. But yeah, if you are interested, some of you already live with this probably came just for the compliance gaps and things like that. But yeah, if you're not live and you want a digital KFS solution, we do have one. It's a super simple process. Borrower sees a vernacular KFS interface in a vernacular language. They can do a quick two-touch sign. They can do a multi-touch sign also if you want more security. And you get a full auditable audit trail of the entire KFS journey. Yeah, so let's move on to the open Q&A. If you can go to the next slide, Shubhesh. Yeah, open Q&A. So there's a hand raised. So Yash, we're going to give you mic access so that you can ask your question. Just give me a second. Wait. Yash, you have mic access, so you can unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, hi Aditya. Am I audible?
Yes.
First of all, thank you so much for the informative session. This was really helpful for us. I represent Fatakpay, which is basically an NBFC. I primarily have only one question to ask.
Sure.
So we have an offer summary screen where we are displaying the entire offer details to the customer, and below the offer we are showing a tick box stating that I agree to the key fact statement, sanction letter, and loan agreement. And it is a hyperlink based document. So if I click on the KFS, I'll be able to view my KFS, but I'm not sharing the key fact statement with the customer until the disbursement successfully happens.
Right.
I'm sharing the link of the documents upon disbursement. So I wanted to understand if this can be classified as non-compliant through RBI's perspective.
Right. So Yash, so the RBI says that if the customer wants, if they have an option, they can take 3 days to decide, right? If the loan is a tenure greater than 1 week. So if you're enabling that flexibility even in this interface, where the customer is not forced to signing it then and there if they so don't wish to, where they can go back and look at the terms of the KFS, read it, process it, take a decision over the course of the minimum period of 3 days, which is the validity period given, right? Okay. If your interface allows for this, then it shouldn't, like, initial reading is it shouldn't be an issue, but it's slightly like ultimately, yeah, the customer needs to be able to look, feel, hold the KFS actually, and not just for the sake of it, but like where they can actually be like, okay, I want to think for 2 days on it. I want to study this KFS in detail. I want to check.
So yeah, he will have to tick. He'll have to manually tick the tick box and then proceed further. I'll not let the user proceed in the digital journey until and unless he actually clicks on the tick box to move forward. but then
True.
it is not mandatory for him to open the hyperlink. So there can be a possibility where the user does not click on the hyperlink and just click on the tick box and moves forward.
I would
Would this create
our reading would be that you should at least show the KFS at the very least. So while we would also recommend the customer being able to download the KFS before they click anything, they should be able to download the KFS, look at it, take time for the decision, because ultimately that KFS needs to be just usable and readable by the borrower. I would say that yes, KFS needs to be displayed explicitly to the customer with an explicit download option. And the acknowledgement, the tick needs to show that, okay, the customer has ticked to this document specifically, right? Because if the tick and the hyperlink are separated, customer can just say that there was some hyperlink there, but ultimately, like it just said, I accept here, so I just ticked it here, right? That gap still remains. Now, again, I think in 95% of cases, this won't be an issue practically or operationally, right? But ultimately, compliance looks at those 5% of cases where it could be an issue, and rules are made to framing to keep those in mind, where the customer truly is kept in the dark because they just didn't click on the link. Given the RBI's focus and consistent emphasis on transparency and like reducing information asymmetry throughout the guidelines, would at the very least display the KFS and allow the customer to download it, because then the RBI, like you can say that, look, I gave the customer time to download, look at the KFS before continuing the journey. Whereas on this, it's like the hyperlink is separated. Tick box is there. Customer obviously is going to tick. RBI wants to create some friction here. Let's be frank. Like RBI wants to create that, hey, we want the customer to pause and think. We want you to actually show the customer this information, like explicitly show them this information and disclose this information. So I would at the very least, while this can be a wider discussion with your compliance team as well on the acknowledgement, whether it's traceable, whether it's auditable, whether it's on the document. Leaving that aside, at the very least would definitely show the KFS document. We also think that an I accept box should somehow reflect on the KFS, and there should be a trail that the I accept has linked to the KFS. But leaving that aside, that's probably a more detailed discussion with your compliance team, and happy to take that offline, because ultimately it's a compliance call you need to take. Leaving that aside, I would say just on the face of it, even if you say that, okay, we'll retain, say the I accept box, definitely showing and downloading should be mandatory. Like showing the KFS and downloading the KFS.
So I'll have to explicitly show the entire document to the customer on the screen, and not just show it in the form of a hyperlink.
Correct.
And I also have to give him the liberty and the access to download the document then and there. And then he can come back and then provide his consent to avail the loan and then move forward into disbursement.
Correct. Because RBI said that the KFS shall have a validity period of a minimum of 3 days. And validity period is defined as ultimately the period between customer receiving it and signing it. So essentially, RBI is saying that customer, if they want, can take that minimum of 3 days. Usually lenders give more time for the validity period. I think the standard form was about 6-7 days. But essentially that process should sync with that. So I think showing it and allowing download does sync with that, right? Because ultimately, and you can probably show the customer that this is your KFS, this is what it is. Like ultimately anything you do where you're telling the customer that, hey, this is what this is explicitly, you can do this if you so wish, like download it and see it and come back. I should not have a problem with that. But yeah, that explicit showing at the very least should definitely happen.
Okay, understood. And it's all right if I don't make the user e-sign it, right? In any form. If I just have a tick box, that's okay.
No, again, as I said, that is a compliance call.
Explicitly showing the document and then making the user click on the tick box. But e-signing is not mandatory, right?
Depends on what you're talking about. Like e-sign, like an Aadhaar e-sign is definitely not mandatory. But the question is what the electronic authentication will do, right? Even the tick box is like on one end of the spectrum, Aadhaar e-sign is on the other end of the spectrum. They're all ultimately ways of electronically conveying some form of consent, right? The question ultimately is a compliance call you need to take. Again, that's a slightly more detailed discussion. Is on, look, what this I accept box, does it show that, okay, this I accept has been done on the KFS? Can I later show that, okay, this KFS has this I accept? What if let me like flip it. What if the customer says, I did not click this box? How do you show that actually, no, this KFS was shown and they did click the box?
So we have a mobile number and IP saved. We have the date and timestamp in the backend in our tables as we speak. So I have the IP of the mobile number. I have the mobile number. Then I've got the date and timestamp when the user
Right.
landed on the summary screen and he clicked on
Right.
it. But then it is not explicitly presented or displayed on the KFS document.
Correct.
We are not
Yeah.
integrating it inside the KFS document.
So that's the ambiguity, I would say. And that's the spectrum of like different approaches we've seen lenders taking, right? Some have said, no, for safety's sake, all of this information you have a mobile number also is there, but it should also be on the document. So there's that unbroken chain where there's literally no gap. You may be comfortable with it. Look, it's okay. It's not on the document. We ultimately have all these other things that paint the story of them clicking the KFS. It's ultimately about the story being painted and how many gaps you're willing to be there. And this generally lenders just have a variety of opinions on this. So really can't say one or the other. It's ultimately, again, like it's a very, I know it's like a very unsatisfying answer, but ultimately it's like, how comfortable is your compliance team with the process?
Understood. Got it.
Happy to take it offline if you just want a wider discussion on this.
Sure, absolutely. How can I get in touch with you if in case I would need some guidance?
Yeah, so Shubhesh, if you can go to the next slide, you can reach out to us. Like you can scan this QR code and like you can just fill the form on our KFS page.
Sure, I've taken a screenshot of this.
Perfect. And we'll send this deck also.
Oh, perfect then. Yeah. Great.
Otherwise, you can also, always, if you see me on LinkedIn, you see Shubhesh on LinkedIn, you can message us. You can just go to legality.com. There's ways to contact us there. There's 5 different ways to contact us. If you just go to our website or go to this QR code, like you can, like there's a form there. There's an email address, inquiry@legality. Catch us on LinkedIn. Like just there's multiple ways. Just, if you find us, reach out to us. But yeah, this QR code would be the best way.
Perfect.
For you
also, another easy way to do is just we've launched a poll. You just click yes, and we'll reach out to you.
Sure. Yeah, I've clicked on yes.
Thanks. Awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Yash.
Thanks a lot.
So we've received some more questions in the Q&A box. Right? Yeah. So one question is, what if the customer downsizes the loan subsequently? How can we share the revised KFS? Great question, right? Because loans, terms and conditions practically often change. So honestly, on a digital process, as Shubhesh showed you, so Shubhesh, you can share your screen, share the dashboard again, actually. Or even here. Yeah, you can share the dashboard, actually. Backend.
Just give me a second.
Yeah. With the APR question is still outstanding. So it's an anonymous attendee has asked this. So whoever you are, we will come to the APR discussion. We'll just cover the simpler questions first. And the APR one, I think it's simple only. It's just when you say subsequent screen, like, so anonymous, but like you can, my follow-up question to you is like, when you say subsequent screen, do you mean after the document has been signed or before the document has been signed? So anyway, yeah. So for the question on customer downsizes the loan frequently, how can you share the revised KFS? So what would happen there is you will ultimately generate in your LOS LMS an update to the loan terms, right? So there'll be updated data, right? So let's say you have a KFS template, right, in the workflow. So if Shubhesh like opens up the workflow, let's say either in the same workflow, you send a revised KFS, right? So your loan agreement will populate data into the KFS and this will be triggered again to the customer. They can get it on WhatsApp or on your net banking app. You send a link. Probably for this, because it's a subsequent communication and not the origination communication, probably a link via WhatsApp or SMS can go to them, or email as well. Can go to the customer saying, look, your revised KFS for your downsized loan is here. They click on the link and as Shubhesh showed you, that KFS with the revised details pops up and they do the quick sign and things like that. Or what you can do is you can set up 2 workflows. One is, of course, the original KFS workflow. And the other is, as Shubhesh said, a revised KFS workflow, right? What Shubhesh is doing on screen right now, right? So you set up this revised KFS workflow. You set up a template for a revised KFS, maybe with a header that this is a KFS for a revised loan. Same template, ultimately, annexure A. You just set it as a different workflow so that logically from your LOS LMS end, where there's a revision, this workflow is triggered to the customer, right? On their WhatsApp or something, and they can re-acknowledge the KFS. So it's honestly a question of re-triggering this link, which can be done in an automated way via API, or manually if your branch or field agent needs to do it, they get user access or send-only access to the dashboard, where they go into this, they go to revised workflow, enter the revised details, trigger the link, customer receives on WhatsApp and re-acknowledges it, right? So the answer is simple. You just have to re-trigger this process, which can either be done automatically or it can be done like manually via dashboard through a simple few click process for your branch or field staff, right? I hope that answered the question. Do raise your hand if any follow-ups, if that was not clear enough. The second question is the email through which the KFS goes. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is the question, right? The final, like when the document is signed, email or the WhatsApp, right? That should not be from legality. That should be from, say, the organization name. That's possible, right? So you can send WhatsApp through your WhatsApp handle. That's possible. Small implementation thing that needs to be done, takes a day or two. Our team will help you do that. If you want to send email from your subdomain, that is also possible, where it will be your org name at the signing link. You can customize the subdomain as well. So you can essentially everything we showed you, you can have your branding and your name everywhere. All right. So all of that is possible. Some small one-time tech configs that need to be done, but our team will help you do that. I hope that was the question. If not, please do like raise your hand or re-ask in the Q&A box if there are any gaps in that answer. So now the pending question, and please keep your questions coming, keep your hands raised if you have any questions. Pending question is ultimately the APR shown as part of offer details, or can it be shown separately as part of KFS in a subsequent screen? So like it needs to be shown as part of the KFS before loan agreement. All right. So let's say offer details, loan agreement is here, and your KFS is in the middle along with APR, that's fine, right? Because it's all before the loan agreement. What RBI is concerned with is, look, now if your question is in your offer, you're getting one KFS acknowledged without the APR. Once that's acknowledged, you're generating KFS with an APR and the loan agreement. And then you're collecting an acknowledgement from the customer there. Now that is an approach some lenders do follow, where they're first collecting the initial KFS acknowledgement. But ultimately, our reading of the intent of the RBI is that when you're making the offer, the APR at the time of making that offer should be there with the KFS. So you definitely should show the APR at the time of any time you're showing the KFS in the beginning as well, right? Because RBI is saying, look, part of the key fact statement, whenever you're showing it, is this APR, right? Customer should get full transparency at the earliest moment possible before the loan agreement. So while your APR may update, and you should collect a fresh acknowledgement on that update at a subsequent time, ultimately RBI, like our reading, plain reading of the guideline is that whenever you first show the KFS is when you need to show the APR, because RBI is clear. The KFS shall be accompanied by the computation of APR sheet and the amortization schedule. And like in our reading, there's no way around this language. Like, so when you show the KFS, you have to show those two annexures. Perhaps if you have an RBI POC, RBI point of contact, perhaps this is an operational ambiguity that RBI may need to clarify, because I do understand that sometimes changes do happen. On a plain reading, it's very clear APR has to be shown whenever you show the KFS first. Like it's just, that's what the guidelines say. Like perhaps reach out to RBI if there's like serious, and would be happy to also understand what the actual like core operational difficulty that you're facing for this, and which like maybe insurmountable also. So happy to connect offline to discuss it in more detail and see if there are easy ways to do it while still complying, right? Because I do understand for some lenders, it can be a slight operational hassle. The way we read it is RBI wants that friction for you. They want that friction for you. They want that friction for the customer, because they just want that information to be disclosed as openly as possible at the earliest possible moment before the loan agreement. Hope that answered the question. Do ask a follow-up if it didn't. Otherwise, for everyone else, please do raise your hand if you have any other questions. We will, and if you want us to answer any questions that crop up after this webinar, you please do contact us. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn as well, Aditya Patel at LinkedIn, or aditya@legality.com. You can drop me an email as well. You can drop an email so I'll drop my email there. Shubhash has dropped it in the chat. I will also drop the legality email, inquiry@legality.com, or you can scan this QR code. Or you can answer the poll as well. We'll be happy to answer any questions. We'll also send you a recording within the next 48 hours. You can reply to that email as well if you have any follow-up questions. Yeah. So thank you everyone for attending. Again, if you have any questions, please do raise your hand or ask in the Q&A box. We do have one more question. we have to disclose. So the question is, do we have to disclose the KFS at the time of disbursement or during loan agreement? So now, Shubhesh, if you can go to the approach A, approach B screen. So we've honestly seen two approaches, right? Cautious approach and a liberal approach. If you were to ask us, say you have to recommend one, we'll always recommend the cautious one, because one, when in doubt with compliance related issue, always choose the more cautious path, right? So that's approach A, which would, I think, be what you're terming as time of disbursement, where you send KFS to the borrower. Or if you have sanction letter as a separate process, you send KFS along with that saying, look, we have sanctioned you this loan. These are the terms that you need to know. This is the APR, this is the amortization schedule. Do you acknowledge? They acknowledge, and then loan agreement comes in. Approach B, the liberal approach is, look, KFS is the first agreement on the docket. It's KFS, APR, amortization schedule, then loan agreement, and customer is like, okay, I've seen the KFS. Sure. Loan agreement, sure. Let me e-sign all of it at once. We would not recommend approach B. If you were to ask us choose between these two approaches, we would always recommend approach A, because approach A is 100% definitely compliant, because not only are you showing it before the loan agreement, you're also collecting the acknowledgement before the loan agreement. Unfortunately, I don't have an like that. So that our answer is, if you were to ask us to recommend one, it would be approach A at the time of like before the loan agreement itself. So when you do your disbursement, like honestly, you do it after the loan agreement, then it would definitely not be at the time of disbursement. It would be much before that. If by disbursement you mean where you're actually showing the sanction and things like that, just keyword is before loan agreement. Some read it to be approach A, some read it to be approach B, but it should be shown to the borrower before loan agreement, and we think it should also be acknowledged before the loan agreement, right? In the chronology of steps. Hope that answered the question. Do ask a follow-up. We'll send this deck to you as well, so you can look at it in detail. And happy to, after you look at the deck and things like that, have a more detailed conversation if you still have any doubts. Sorry, there was one question which I put in answered, but we'll answer this live. One question was, technically, should the numbers also be in a vernacular language, numbers that you're populating? To be honest, I think like Roman numerals, English numbers are largely understandable by most people, even if their native language is something else, because people use phones and things like that, and numbers are largely people use like English numbers or like Roman numerals as numbers. Sometimes if you put it in local language, people will probably be more confused. But yes, I guess if you're looking at technicalities and customer doesn't understand English numbers, it should be in a local language. I think just practically though, most LOS systems, most LMS systems, the entire banking tech stack operates with English numbers. So operationally, would love to hear how people would actually tackle this. I think what we've seen most lenders doing is that numbers are in English or Roman numerals, because ultimately customers do understand those, right? They may not understand words that are in English. They may want that in local language, right? But numbers across the board, market practices that Roman numerals are fine. And I like, yeah, that's market practice. Yeah, and before we sign off, if you want to just stay in the loop about, we do these sessions regularly about other RBI guidelines, what new RBI guidelines come up, how that can impact your operational process, especially your paperwork process, how you can comply. We do live demos of our solution to help you comply with RBI things. We do new case studies with existing clients on how they implement legality. And when we launch new features, if you want to just stay in the loop with all these updates, you can scan this QR code. This is not to be confused with the previous QR code. You can scan this QR code. We send you a weekly WhatsApp message or a weekly email with either of these three updates, either new features we launch, new industry and regulatory updates like KFS, right? The gold lending RBI circular that was issued last month, not last month, few months back, or even case studies of how people are actually using legality or going live with digital paperwork. Do scan this QR code to opt in. We are also soon launching a new series where we are actually going to interview customers of banks on the ground, on the street, outside bank branches, and try to understand from them what they actually want from their banking experience. not necessarily related to paperwork. We just want to speak to end customers of banks on what does a new age customer, what does a customer today want from their banking or lending experience. And we're going to launch that series soon. So if you want to stay updated of when we do launch it and want that content first, do scan this QR code to join our WhatsApp and mailing list. We promise we don't spam. We send you one WhatsApp message or one email per week. And you can always, of course, opt out if you don't like it. With that, thanks, Shubhesh, for the demo. Thank you, everyone, for attending this Thursday. Have a good afternoon. Have a great weekend ahead.